all about it. It should be fascinating. So that's a little bit later in our programming. For today's show, Donald Trump did a rally in Pennsylvania. I'm not actually as down on it as some other people are, but there were some troubling parts to it, of course. And I'll share those with you a little bit later in the program. And you're gonna love the portion where Donald Trump tucks tail and runs from the NRA like the coward that he is. So that'll be fun a little bit later. So now let's get started over here. Fun story to start with for you guys. There's a gentleman named Chris Tague. He's in New York. He's running for supervisor and assembly candidate. He's a Republican, so he wants to cut the budget. Okay, he's going to be very tough about that, kind of. He is going to be talking to Don Matheson on WIOX, and this radio interview did not go well. Let's listen in.
The current New York State budget is about $149 billion. That works out to $7,570 per person. As a comparison, Florida has about the same number of people. They spend $92 billion. That's $4,500 per person. So does New York spend too little, too much, or maybe the right amount?
I think they spend too much.
So where would you cut?
They don't spend it in the right places.
So what would you cut?
Well, there's a lot of different programs I would say that need to be looked at. I mean, number one, well, I would say probably in the areas of. Hold on one second, would you?
Sure.
I'm having one of those moments.
Wow. You know who's fist pumping right now? Rick Perry, like, yes. Okay, that guy was worse than me. We finally found the guy. Rick Perry's going around town going about my friend Tague over here. Look, dude, you claim that the budget is bloated. You're running on that. That's your whole thing. Oh my God, these some bitch Democrats and liberals overspending. Okay, name one thing that they're overspending on. This is not a hostile interview. The guy's gonna try to help him in a second, probably agrees with him. But he's like, any idea what you're running on? So this is not an obscure issue. This is not, hey, what did you think about the minutia of one particular tax bill? It's, okay, we're way overspending. Anything, what are we overspending on? My favorite part was the breathing. That put him over the top of Rick Perry, nicely done. And dude, you can't come up with a single excuse, not one. Like, hey, my kids are in the room, sorry I got distracted. Okay, what was that again? Let's take a break and come back if you don't mind. I'm sorry about the kids. I don't know, make something up. He's not going to. The pain continues.
Maybe I can help. Some of the biggest areas that the state spends money on are education. They also spend a lot of money for Medicaid. And
you know what? That's exactly where, as far as education goes, I'm a proponent of education. And I'd like to see us, especially in rural upstate New York.
Wait. Hold on.
Yep.
The question on the table is, where will you cut the budget?
Well, I think Medicaid's a good place to start. But you asked me a question about, also about education. What I was saying.
No, I was trying to help you. I was saying those are the big areas. When somebody says they're running for office, my job is to ask them specific questions. So, okay, you're running for the state assembly. If you get elected, you're saying to me that the state spends too much money. So I would like to know, if you get elected, what areas you think the state should spend less money on.
And I just told you Medicaid.
That's it.
Well, that's one of them.
Let's talk about guns.
Mercy, that was the host throwing in the towel, trying to get him out of that ring. So that's the only thing you got. We should cut Medicaid. By the way, that's not popular either. And there is a really important point here. Who cares about Chris Tague? And he's running for assembly candidate in New York. That's not the point. The point is, overall for the Republican Party, they're full of it. they don't actually have huge areas of the budget to cut. How do I know that on the national level? Well, they told us forever, don't worry, we can do tax cuts for the rich, and then we'll find plenty of places to cut. Well, we'll cut, no problem at all, right? And then it turns out, oh no, you couldn't. You did the giant tax cuts, and you put a $1.5 trillion, not billion, $1.5 trillion hole in the deficit, because there aren't that many places to cut. In fact, one of the places they tried to cut was CHIP, which is health insurance for kids. And that polled at 80% popularity, the program did. So cutting a program that was 80% popular did not play well. And then they bargained and they held it hostage until Democrats gave them something in the budget bill, et cetera. And then they pretended they were for CHIP all along. They're like, children's health insurance. Well, of course we're for it. I mean, you go down the list, even if this knucklehead could name a couple of things, a go-to move on the national level is, oh, you cut foreign aid. Oh, that's just foreigners getting money, right? The number one recipient of foreign aid is Israel. Do you want to cut their aid? Oh, no, we're going to keep Israel's aid. The number two recipient is Egypt because of a peace deal they made with Israel. So we need to give it to Egypt because of Israel. Do you want to cut that aid? Israel doesn't want us to cut it, so we can't cut that either. So what do you want to cut? Chris Stagg right there was the representation of the Republicans on a macro level. They don't know what to cut. They couldn't possibly cut enough to justify the tax cut they keep giving for the rich. That is why under Republican presidents like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush and Donald Trump, deficits always explode. Okay. All right, no one wants me to imitate that breathing again. So we're moving on. Now, really interesting election going on in Pennsylvania. It's a special election. They're going to redistrict these districts in Pennsylvania, and so they'll have to do it all over again. And two guys in this race might be interestingly in different districts next time around, which is the 2018 elections. But in this special election, it's important because it's a bellwether. Trump won this district by about 20 points. So can the Republicans keep it? That shouldn't be a difficult question. I mean, Jesus, you won it by 20. Okay, maybe you win it by 15, but it shouldn't be that close. Well, of course it is. Now, Trump went to do a rally for Rick Saccone, the Republican candidate in that race. But what was funny is that he said a lot of crazy things and he talked for over an hour, but he hardly mentioned Rick Saccone. So why? Well, let's go to Axios to find out. Jonathan Swan writing, there's a reason Trump said hardly anything about Republican candidate Rick Saccone during a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday night that was supposed to promote his candidacy. The reason, Trump thinks Saccone is a terrible, quote, weak candidate, according to 4 sources who've spoken to the president about him. Yeah. You're not losing 20-point leads all across the country, including in places like Oklahoma and Kansas, because of Rick Saccone. There's another factor involved here, and it might be the president. Now, let's give you a lot more context here. Nate Silver explains the district voted for Trump by 20 points and Romney by 17. The previous Republican incumbent there, Tim Murphy, didn't even have a Democratic challenger in 2014 or 2016. That's how Republican the district was. And Murphy won by 28 points the last time he did back in 2012. So this is not a purple district. This is a deeply red district. Republicans, even terrible candidates like Mitt Romney, win there easily. But that is not the case now. Now we go to the Hill. Democratic Connor Lamb, who's obviously running against Saccone, is gaining ground in Pennsylvania's closely watched special election and holds a 6-point lead over Republican Saccone, according to a poll released the day before the race. Now that's a Monmouth poll. It's a little bit of an outlier, and if you take a smaller set of the people that have voted in previous elections, then you get down to a 2-point advantage for Lamb, and other polls have it closer. Most of them have Lamb winning. Some still have Saccone holding on to a very narrow margin, but overall, it's at best even. So you've lost 20 points there. At a minimum, if you take the last contested election in that district for Congress, you've lost 28 points. That is a significant trend, and it's not just about one candidate. But of course, the Republicans would like to blame it on that. Now, you could say, well, Rick Saccone's not doing a good job of raising money. And that's relatively true. Conor Lamb has actually outraised them on a personal level. But that is deeply misleading because Saccone has more money because of independent expenditures, the dark money that is flowing in from people like the Koch brothers. TYT Investigates has a good story about that. We'll put the link down below. From that story, let me quote Alex Koch, one of our reporters here. As of March 12th, the top 6 outside spending groups in the race have all sided with Saccone, accounting for $10.3 million or 84% of the total independent spending, according to campaign finance data compiled by ProPublica. So most of the outside money is going to Saccone, significantly so, and he's got a ton of money. So money isn't the real issue. Anyone who says otherwise is, at best case scenario, not well versed with the facts. Okay, so back to Axios now. Jonathan Swan explains, should Saccone lose, Republicans will be quick to describe his loss as meaningless and will argue it's not a bellwether for November's elections. They'll say he was a terrible candidate and that his loss should be a wake-up call to other Republican candidates who may be getting lazy about their fundraising. Now, I just explained to you why that is a piss-poor excuse. That is just not the reality of the matter. It is not money that is making the difference. It's not Saccone in particular. Otherwise, you wouldn't have massive swings in places like Kentucky, Oklahoma, Kansas, and the list goes on and on. Deeply red places in Wisconsin flipping. The governor there, Scott Walker, is saying that it is a wake-up call for the Republican Party. But this is a party that is in deep slumber mode, and they refuse to wake up to the real problem, which is Donald Trump. So CNN interviewed some Saccone supporters here. So they're Republicans. Let's listen in on what one of them thinks about how Trump is helping or not helping in this particular race.
I don't necessarily like how the president presents things. I don't like his persona, so to speak. That's why, while I'm still supporting Saccone, it did cause me to look a little towards Conor Lamb. If anything, if I were Saccone, I'd tell Trump to stay away because he puts his foot in his mouth.
You're saying that the president's support of Saccone and his rally for Saccone would make you less inclined to support him?
Much less inclined.
So those are 2 Republican voters saying they're less inclined to support the Republican. In fact, they're looking at the Democrat now because Trump is supporting Saccone, so they're thinking of fleeing from the scene. So that gives you a sense of what's happening across the country. Finally, we're gonna go to Amy Walter from the Cook Political Report. And their job is to just look at the numbers here and see how things are playing out in terms of politics. And they say, this is a red congressional district that should go for the generic Republican. But the environment today is much worse than, quote, normal for Republicans. That's not because of Saccone or Lamb, but because of Trump. That part is obvious, but of course the president is thin-skinned and would never admit to that. So like the child that he is, of course he's blaming everyone but himself. So he's ostensibly going to help Saccone there, but all he does is talk about himself for an hour at that rally and then leaks to the press that it's all the candidate's fault and not his. Classic Donald Trump, and one of the many reasons why people have soured on him and why these red districts are now up for grabs and the Democrats look to be in pretty good shape there. Okay, so now let's go to one more story about Saccone, and that's the one I was telling you about that we broke. God, I love these flies in the studio. All right, anyway, so for God's sake, for longtime viewers, we've had this issue a lot. There's insanity in the studio. There isn't, it's just one fly. Okay, now, TYT Investigates has broken a good story or covered a story about the race in Pennsylvania, the special election that's going on. It's Rick Saccone versus Conor Lamb. Saccone is the Republican in the race. There's a lot of other press talking about how Saccone is not doing well in fundraising personally. Now, what they're missing is the bigger picture about the overall money in the race and the independent expenditures, and that's where Saccone is doing excellent. And so we want to show you what the real numbers are and then talk about why Saccone is doing well in that regard. So as Alex Koch reports here, as of March 12th, the top 6 outside spending groups in the race have all sided with Saccone, accounting for $10.3 million or 84% of the total independent spending, according to a campaign finance data compiled by ProPublica. So the outside money is going almost exclusively to Saccone. Why? Well, the incredibly rich companies and people want more tax cuts. They want more deregulation, and Saccone is their boy, and he will do as instructed. So let's give you more context. Overall, including campaign spending, the race has cost roughly $16 million. For Saccone, outside money has accounted for 94% of total spending in his favor. So does he have popular support in the district? That's how a lot of the right wing, especially the national politicians, paint money in the race. Like, well, he's got popular support. No, he doesn't. It's not from the district. 94% is outside money. They don't care about that district. They care about getting another congressman who will vote for more tax cuts for the rich, more deregulation of their industries. That's why that money is pouring in. By the way, do we have a democracy? $16 million for a House race. This is an auction, it's not a democracy. So let's look at the people who are participating in this auction and buying this particular candidate. Since late November, Charles Koch, oh look at that. His wife Elizabeth, son Chase, and Koch Industries have contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to committees involved in the Pennsylvania 18 race. So the Koch brothers, in all the different ways that Alex explains, are pouring money into this race. And the link to the full article is down below in the description box if you're watching on YouTube or comment section on Facebook. You should always look there for the links to the stories that we talk about. He lays out all the different ways that the Koch brothers are funneling money into the race. So why? Well, why do the Koch brothers care so much? Well, you're not going to be surprised. It's the same old story as I've been telling you. The Koch network pushed hard for the GOP tax cut bill last year, spending $20 million, pressuring lawmakers to give corporations and the richest Americans enormous tax breaks. And that was money really well spent. That is why they try to buy politicians like Rick Saccone, because that $20 million is a drop in the bucket from what they made from those tax breaks. They benefit to the tune of not millions, but billions of dollars. The Koch family got billions, and that's before the estate tax. We're talking about pass-through income. We're talking about the top rate being lowered, corporate taxes being lowered dramatically, which is going to, it's either going to help the Koch Industries because of the lower corporate tax rate or through their pass-through entities and their own personal taxes. And then you get to the estate tax. Billions upon billions of dollars in savings to the Koch brothers. So sprinkling in a couple of percentage points to cheap politicians like Rick Saccone is actually a good return on investment. Perhaps we shouldn't let them privately finance our elections so that they don't buy all of our politicians. But in this case, it's not working so well because he's losing the race, even though that is a heavily Republican district. Because all the TV ads they're buying is not working as much anymore, but they keep going that well. So more on why they might want to purchase Rick Saccone. For the Kochs and their business interests, Saccone is a good bet, Koch explains. The small government conservative has touted his support for the recent tax cuts, and outside groups have bought ads attacking Lamb for his opposition to the cuts. And here's what Saccone told supporters, quote, "We had a great tax bill that we just passed." So good pat on the head for Rick. Good job, good job. Keep voting for those tax cuts that are worth overall trillions of dollars for the rich and for multinational corporations. So it's not the only issue they care about. Again, Alex Koch lays out several different issues they care about, including oil and gas interests, which Koch Industries has a lot of money tied up in those industries. Saccone is, of course, in favor of more fracking and more fossil fuel energy industries. It's a win-win for Koch. And now one more here. Saccone is surely the better candidate for the Kochs, as Koch explains, whose corporate conglomerate includes oil and gas drilling, pipeline and chemical businesses. Koch Industries has an abysmal pollution record, having had to pay over $736 million in fines for numerous environmental violations since 2000. The deregulation is not so that America has more freedom. It's deregulation so the Koch brothers don't have to keep paying hundreds of millions of dollars in fines when they pollute. The pollution goes into the air and the water that you and your kids breathe and drink. Well, that's inconvenient for them. They don't want to pay those fines. They want to be able to pollute the rivers and the air without having people bothering them. So what do? They get a guy like Rick Saccone says, oh, you want trillions in tax cuts? Can do. You don't want to protect the environment or people's kids or families? Can do, no problem, Mr. Koch. What else do you need, Mr. Koch? Oh, you'd like me to end the unions because the unions actually stand up for your workers. They collect them together so they have some sort of leverage over you guys who have a collective about $85 billion between Charles and David Koch. Well, no problem. Attack the unions, attack the workers, attack the people who are receiving wages from Koch Industries. Whatever the Kochs want, Saccone will give to them. That is why they've poured in all this money. Luckily, for the moment being at least, it appears that it's not working very well. Tomorrow's the election, and if you live in that district, you might want to do something about that. But there is one candidate in the race that is clearly interested in representing one family in particular, and that is Rick Saccone and Koch Industries, the Koch family overall, have to be very pleased about the policy positions of their candidate, though not pleased that people aren't buying what they're selling anymore. Okay, now I got to take a quick break. When we come back, the Trump rally, was it as bad as people say? I actually have mixed feelings about that. And then Trump buckles to the NRA again. What happened? I thought you were a tough guy. We'll pick that apart when we come back. right, back on the Young Turks. Guys, we've got a lot of stories, so let's get going. Let's go to the rally, okay? So Donald Trump goes to Pennsylvania to do a rally. He's supposed to be helping the candidate there, Rick Saccone. Lots of folks with good data showing that he's actually hurting the candidate by being there. He hardly mentions the candidate at all, but he goes on his rants about his favorite topic, himself. Of course, it lasts for about an hour. Now, I'm gonna break it down for you guys. I actually don't object to much of it, which puts me in the minority of the press. There is one part that I really object to that I'll share with you at the end. But first, let's have fun with Donald Trump being Donald Trump.
But, well, I'll tell you, we did a great job in the Olympics. President Moon of South Korea said without Donald Trump, the Olympics would have been a total failure. It's true. True. You know, might as well say it. Nobody else is going to say it, right? Might as well say it.
It's inconceivable. It's true. It's true. It's not remotely true. Okay, the Olympics would have been a failure without Donald Trump. Based on what? The curling just could not have continued. I know what his silly theory on this is. I was so tough on the North Koreans, it made them want to cooperate with South Korea. So when South Korea brought the North Koreans in and they walked together, etc., that was because Donald Trump was so tough on them. And if it wasn't for that, the whole Olympics would have been a failure. Oh, come on, man. If you're a Trump voter, you really believe that? But look, that's minor. It's stupid braggadocio. I'm so used to it. I don't really care that much. So, and then here comes Trump talking about his looks in a political rally. Anyway, let's have fun. Let's watch.
And Connor Lamb the sham, right? Lamb the sham. He's trying to act like a Republican, so he won't give me one vote. Look, I don't know him. Looks like a nice guy. I hear he's nice looking. I think I'm better looking than him. I do. And he's slightly younger than me. Slightly. No, I heard that, then I saw he's okay.
Why are we talking about Connor Lamb's looks? Lamb the sham. This guy's he's the ringleader of a 3-ring circus. So the carnival barker coming out here and barking is not surprising to me. All right, so now let's go to insults. Classic.
It's 1999. I'm on Meet the Press, a show now headed by Sleepy Eyes Chuck Todd. He's a sleeping son of a bitch, I'll tell you.
Look, he's a performance artist. I don't even know if, no one knows if he's actually a Republican. He's just riding the wave, and he loves that crowd. So he loves to stoke them up, and he knows what stokes them up. And that's the one thing he's good at, which is reading the room. What do you guys like? Oh, you like curses? Then I'll throw out curses. And that part is actually effective. Why is it effective? Because the media overreacts. Look, real people, do they care that much about cursing? Yeah, I mean, maybe some evangelical women voters care about it. That's what they're saying. But overall, no, and his male voters love it. But hook, line, and sinker, here comes the media. Betsy DeVos is on, and they're going to question her about it.
You had the president using what we used to call a dirty word to describe one of my colleagues, and I wonder, as the education secretary who's in charge of what our kids learn, what do you think of that kind of language? Would you wash someone's mouth out with soap?
Well, I would probably use different language myself, and I think we all have an opportunity and a responsibility to be examples to our kids.
Would you include the president?
That would include the president as well.
Yeah. I really don't think regular people care. This morning, all that was on television was, the president cursed, the president cursed. Get to real stuff. Who cares? And people generally like it. So he calls somebody a son of a bitch. Big deal. He gives them nicknames, Sleepy Eye. Hey, progressives, instead of complaining about it, do likewise. Okay, call him a son of a bitch. What did I call him during the elections? Loser Donald, because he bankrupted 6 companies. He's a total obvious idiot and loser. Meanwhile, the Democrats are like, oh, golly gee, I don't like it when he uses bad words. No, when he punches you in the face, instead of crying about it, punch him back. So I don't care about that stuff at all. Here's one other thing that people are getting on him for, and I think this is, again, totally fine. We're gonna get to the bad part in just a second, but watch this too.
You know how easy, remember I used to tell how easy it is to be presidential? But you'd all be out of here right now. You'd be so bored. Because I could stand up, right? I could stand up. I'm very presidential. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Rick Saccone will be a great, great congressman. He will help me very much. He's a fine man, and Yang is a wonderful wife. And to all of the military out there, we respect you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And then you go, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. That's easy. See, that's easy.
I'll go further. Not only do I not care, I actually agree with him on that. So Obama would get out there and be super presidential. God, he was classy. He'd, in a classy, sleepy way, almost never make his case when he was president. When he was running for president, he gave the world's greatest speeches. The race speech was one of the best I've ever heard, the audacity of hope, and the list goes on and on. But when he was president, and then let me tell you something, is anyone paying attention? No, good, all right, let me continue, right? Whereas Trump gets out there and he's a showman, and he goes, oh, I'm not gonna do it like the other guys. I'm gonna actually entertain you so you pay attention, and then I'm gonna make my case, and I'm gonna make it over and over and over and over again. Now, most of what Trump says is not true. The Olympics would not have been a failure without him. He is not better looking than Conor Lamb. He really thinks that all those women throughout his life dated him because he was so good looking. It was your daddy's money, idiot. It had nothing to do with your looks. But it doesn't have to be true for it to be good politics. So, man, the Democrats are so stiff, and that's why they lose to him. So stop complaining about it. I think that's perfectly fine. But the policy matters. So the one time he talks about policy, he says something terrible. Watch this.
The only way to solve the drug problem is through toughness. When I was in China, and other places, by the way, I said, Mr. President, do you have a drug problem? No, we do not. I said, big country, 1.4 billion people, right? Not much of a drug problem. I said, what do you attribute that to? Well, the death penalty. True.
That's, again, not true. That is not that China doesn't have the death penalty. It's that is not what the issue is when it comes to drug addiction. So this guy, wannabe dictator, positively quoting the Chinese, who are both communist and dictatorial, saying, let's just execute people. Hey, yeah, that's the American way, isn't it? No, that is not the American way. So when he talks about policy, he is abhorrent. And so, okay, how do you attack him likewise? You go, you state the truth, but state it in a way that resonates with people. Do we think the #1 problem in America in terms of drugs is marijuana? And that if we executed people who were selling marijuana, that our drug problem would be solved? Which moron thinks that? No one thinks that. If you do, you're incredibly stupid. No, the real problem is opioids. That's what's killing over 60,000 Americans every year. It has lowered our life expectancy for the whole country. Who deals opioids? The pharmaceutical companies. And who takes donor money from the pharmaceutical companies and covers their ass every single day? Donald, sleazy, corrupt Trump. That's who does it. So, Donald, if you're asking for the death penalty for drug dealers, I think you ought to be careful what you ask for. Those are some of your top donors. That's how you fight Donald Trump. Okay, let's go to what the Democrats do instead, which is fight each other. All right, so in the state of Kansas, we got great news in the 3rd district. That's a unique district. It's in Kansas, but it voted for Hillary Clinton. And in the primaries, it voted for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. So it has a chance of being progressive. Unfortunately, right now, represented by Kevin Yoder, a Republican who's one of the worst Republicans in the country, the #1 recipient of payday lender money, and of course has authored bills to deregulate payday lenders. How surprising. So anyway, the good news here is that Democrats have an excellent chance of taking this district back. And there's a candidate who's killing it. His name is Brent Welder. And he's beating Kevin Yoder, the incumbent, in a recent poll released 49 to 42. So ladies and gentlemen, we got him. So if everybody helps Brent Welder, he is very likely to win. That's a 7-point lead already. That's fantastic. So what is the Democratic Party going to do? They're going to try to bring someone else into the race. Oh, for God's sake, are you kidding me? There's already a lot of candidates in that race, but Brent is leading. He's doing a great job. He's got an army out there. There's volunteers, there's people donating, there's people who are passionate about it. He was a Bernie Sanders delegate, and in that district that plays really well, and he introduced an amendment to the Democratic platform to get money out. Maybe that's why they're opposed to him. So let's go to the local paper here, Kansas City Star, to see what's happening now. A Leawood woman with experience in the banking industry has entered the Democratic field, trying to unseat Republican US Representative Kevin Yoder. Oh, great, you got a banker, wonderful. That'll really energize the grassroots and get people to show up to vote. The Democrats see that Brent Welder has a lead, and they're like, okay, we can win this thing. We've got a real progressive who can win this thing. So how do we screw it up? Let's recruit a banker. Oh, God, Jesus Christ, man. Sylvia Williams, a candidate, that's the person that they're excited about, apparently the Democratic Party or some donors, say, I do believe that we need to improve the dialogue and have people that are focused on getting some of these issues pushed forward and maybe just take down the tone of the rhetoric some in Washington. So the new banking executive's philosophy is, don't fight Trump and the Republicans too much. Tone down the rhetoric. I mean, Brent Welder, he seems so loud. The way that he's fighting to get money out of politics. Why is that so bad? Tone down the rhetoric. That's the number one problem in Washington? Not close. Another candidate running against Brent Welder has two campaign slogans. The courage to compromise, and I swear, leading from the middle. Leading from the middle. Okay. How about you support the guy winning 49 to 42 against a Republican incumbent? Oh, I know that would be revolutionary. Well, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it. I've told you guys before, tytkansas.com. Go there. We'll have the link down below in the description box on YouTube, comment section on Facebook. You always find the easy to click links there. Raising money for Brent Welder, small donors at a time. Brent was on this show. In 5 minutes, we outraised Kevin Yoder's small donors that he took a whole quarter for. Yoder, the Republican incumbent, has in that last quarter of last year raised over $500,000, over $500,000. Less than $500 of that was from donors giving less than $200. He has almost no real support. And in 5 minutes, we raised way more than he did from small donors. Go to tytkansas.com. If the Democratic donors are not going to support Brent Welder, the Democratic Party is not going to support him. I don't know where they're going to be in the general election, but certainly in the primary, they're like bankers, anybody, but it looks like Brent Welder's doing great, so let's find someone else. Don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. Go donate, and we'll have those links to volunteering and to his website, brentwelder.com. Go make a difference, especially if you live in that district. Volunteering is the most important thing, but if you live anywhere, let's go actually win that seat for a progressive who cares to do the right things. All right, I got to take a break. When we come back, Trump is scared of the NRA. Now he's running from them like a coward, as we suspected that he would. I'll tell you about that and other news when we're back. right, back on a Young Turks. I still have too many stories for you guys. Let's get going. I promise I'll read you guys' tweets later in the show. All right. Donald Trump, of course, always pretends to be a tough guy, and I'm going to show you a lot of videos related to that in a second, including on the issue of guns and the NRA. And he said that he was going to go after them and do some small amount of regulation, but some regulation that the NRA did not like. So let's find out what happened with that. We go to Mediaite here. President Donald Trump recently called for increasing the minimum age for buying long guns like the AR-15 used in the Parkland, Florida high school shooting last month to be raised to 21. But in a school safety proposal announced by the White House on Sunday night, no mention was made of raising the age limit for such gun purchases. Wait a minute. I thought Donald Trump was a tough guy and he was going to raise the age. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Let's listen to Donald Trump himself.
Now, this is not a popular thing to say in terms of the NRA, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm going to just have to say it. But you can't buy, I mean, think of it. You can buy a handgun. You can't buy one. You have to wait till you're 21. But you can buy the kind of weapon used in the school shooting at 18. I think it's something you have to think about.
Now, that's a rare thing that he made sense about. And I said on the show, he will back down. Because all he cares about is corruption. All he cares about is his donors. He can talk like a tough guy all he wants. He's not going to raise the age. Now, he didn't put it in his proposals. He's not going to do it. And then he sent out some tweets. Let's see, maybe in the tweets he's going to correct what they sent out to the public. So let's read those. He said, very strong improvement about his policy on guns, and strengthening of background checks will be fully backed by White House legislation moving forward. Bump stocks will soon be out. Highly trained expert teachers will be allowed to concealed carry subject to state law. Armed guards okay. Deterrent. One more tweet. Now he mentions the age. On 18 to 21 age limits. Watching court cases and rulings before acting. States are making this decision. Things are moving rapidly on this, but not much political support, to put it mildly. In other words, you blinked, didn't you, bitch? Hey, I'm just borrowing the president's words from the rally. So this guy going around, hey, it doesn't make any sense, man. You got the limit on the handguns, but you don't have on the AR-15. I'm gonna push them around, I'll show you. All of a sudden, I'm gonna wait and see. I don't have much political leverage here. Oh, really? What happened, tough guy? Now, this is Donald Trump talking to the governors about how he could stand up to the NRA. Listen to what he said back then.
And there's no bigger fan of the Second Amendment than me, and there's no bigger fan of the NRA. And these guys are great patriots. They're great people. Don't worry about the NRA. They're on our side. You guys, half of you are so afraid of the NRA. There's nothing to be afraid of. And you know what? If they're not with you, we have to fight them every once in a while. That's okay. But sometimes we're going to have to be very tough, and we're going to have to fight them.
Really? Where's the fight? As usual, you surrendered, didn't you? Didn't you? What happened, tough guy? You coward. The minute the money spoke, you're like, oh no, oh, they're very tough, I'm not gonna fight them. Now, he didn't just tease the Republican governors there. When he had the senators at the White House, he also, this is a second instance, was also a tough guy there. Watch this.
Chris, did you have something?
No, I think you underestimate the power of the gun lobby. So.
No, I'll tell you what, the reason I had lunch with the NRA on Sunday, I called them, I said, you gotta come over. I said, fellas, we gotta do something. And they do have great power, I agree with it. They have great power over you people. They have less power over me. I don't need it. What do I need? Some of you people are petrified of the NRA. You can't be petrified.
Look who's petrified now, Donald Duck. Keep quacking, go ahead. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a coward duck. Oh yeah, you guys are scared of him, petrified of him. Not me. Oh, okay, NRA, okay, I'm so sorry. I won't do the age thing. I'll just wait around. I don't have any political support on it. I'm sorry. At the time, Trump specifically asked Senator Pat Toomey if the senator had left raising the minimum age for gun purchases out of his bill, strengthening background checks, because senators are, quote, afraid of the NRA. Well, you left it out of your proposal. So I guess, coward Trump, that makes you afraid of the NRA, doesn't it? Now, Can he make the case? No, it's not because I'm scared of the NRA. It's because of the American people. Nope, cannot make that case. Let me show you the polls. Raising the age limit on gun purchasers is widely popular, according to a Politico poll. This is a recent poll. 82% think the age limit should be 21 to purchase an assault-style weapon, and 81% support requiring purchasers of all firearms to be 21. Incredibly popular with the American people, but not popular with Donald Trump's donors. Is he gonna be with the people or is he gonna be with the swamp? As usual, the coward slinks back to his swamp. Finally, overall, his proposals on bump stocks and all the rest of what he did, which is tiny. It's not even a federal background check, which, by the way, polls at 93%. In fact, I saw a recent poll having him poll at 97%, but he didn't do that either. He did a lower form of a background check, of course. The series of proposals generally fall in line with what the National Rifle Association supports. That's right. Even they don't mind the bump stocks or the weak version of background checks. So at the end of the day, Donald Trump did exactly what he was told to do by the NRA. Let me say it one more time. Coward. Okay. Now, let's go to a different point about Donald Trump that is concerning. So Donald Trump recently meeting with the head of Veteran Affairs for himself, and he picked this guy, but apparently he's having some lack of confidence in him. But he has lack of confidence in everyone. He asked them to do impossible jobs, to cut all the budgets, to try to destroy their departments, to lie for him nonstop, and then when they can't execute that properly, he gets mad at them. So in this case, Shulkin is the head of Veteran Affairs, and he was having a meeting with Donald Trump. And this is where we pick it up with Axios reporting. Trump surprised Shulkin by dialing in Fox and Friends host Pete Hegseth on speakerphone to get his opinion of the legislation, according to two sources with knowledge of the conversation. How demeaning. You're in the middle of the meeting. You didn't call him ahead of time. You didn't call him afterwards. In the middle of the meeting with a really important person in your administration, you're like, hold on, I'm gonna call one of the schmucks from Fox and Friends. And it turns out Hegseth was actually up for the same job and didn't get it. That makes it doubly demeaning. And forget the demeaning part. I don't care how he demeans his own cabinet. They're all a bunch of lackeys and sycophants who should have never taken a job with this monster in the first place. But how preposterously stupid. What does a Fox and Friends host think? Because that's what I watch, and TV's the only thing that matters. An actual policy expert about veterans, no, I'm just gonna turn on the boob tube and see what the Fox guys have to say about it, and I'm gonna ask them in the middle of an important government meeting. And here, Axios, with similar background, the Hegseth call put Shulkin in an awkward spot, according to those sources. Hegseth competed for Shulkin's job and favors more aggressive reform for the VA. Trump talks to Hegseth regularly and enjoys watching him on Fox and Friends. I don't know if he missed this particular segment, because if you're saying, hey, look, maybe Hegseth is a genius on Veterans Affairs and a top expert, not just a idiot TV pundit, then you might want to watch these clips. Now, this is from a little while back, and they were having a fun little segment on Fox and Friends that went slightly awry. Let's see how Pete Hegseth handled this segment.
Pete and Clayton are facing off. They're testing their skills with the axe. Who's going to win this battle with the lumberjacks? That's coming up next. I'm putting my money on Clayton. Who's going to win this battle with the lumberjacks? That's coming up next.
Who's going to win this battle with the lumberjacks? That's coming up next.
How many face palms can I do in one administration? That's the guy you're calling for advice on veteran affairs. Who thought, I'll throw an axe in the middle of New York, and I'm sure I'll hit it, and what's the worst that could happen if I don't hit it? Were there people behind that target? The answer is yes. Watch. Thank God the handle hit him and not the blade. These morons are who Donald Trump thinks are subject matter experts and calls them in the middle of government meetings and humiliates his own cabinet with them. Who's dumber, Hegseth or Trump? It's gotta be Trump for thinking that guy's the genius I need advice from. By the way, Gary Cohn, this just happened a little while before we started the show. Gary Cohn, his top economic advisor, had stepped down, so he needs a new chief economic advisor. So is Donald Trump gonna turn to an economist, a Nobel laureate, an expert, someone who knows policy inside and out? Nope, because the idiot watches TV. So he's gonna turn to a TV host. Here, let's go to video 17 and show you his take on this issue.
I have pretty good, Carl, that Larry Kudlow is now the leading contender for the job to replace Gary Cohn. The leading contender.
Do we think he is the leading contender or a leading contender?
The.
That is big.
And again, I believe that he is, we can call him a leading contender. I am preferring the leading contender. Obviously, I don't want to be ahead of the president on this because I know that there are other people involved. No decision's been made, but the president, I believe, is listening to Larry Kudlow on our air and likes what he hears.
He's gonna pick a TV pundit as his chief economic advisor. Okay, great, wonderful, that'll probably work out nicely, but I don't even know if he knows this, but Cramer doesn't even agree with him on the thing that Cohn, the former economic advisor, quit over, the tariffs. But listen to how Joe DiPaolo at Mediaite describes it. Cramer reports, Jim Cramer, as you just saw there, another CNBC host, reports that Trump is set to pick Kudlow despite the fact that the CNBC contributor strongly opposes Trump's proposed tariffs on steel and aluminum and is, quote, the ultimate free trader. Why? It's because he's seen him on TV. This moron is our president. Young Turks. right, back on the Young Turks. Look, I can only read a couple of comments here because we got to go. But thank you guys for writing in. First, Jeremy Fair writes in, although I'm stuck working until 5:45 or 6 p.m. Central, it helps that I can listen to TYT for the last hour of my workday. Hearing the facts makes working at a heavily religious and conservative company more tolerable. Keep doing what you guys do. Look, I read that because you're not alone. Wherever you are, even if you're surrounded by conservatives or religious folks or whoever it might be, you're not alone, and we appreciate that you're spending some time with us as well. And share this stream on YouTube and Facebook, wherever you're watching, so we can spread the word. All right, Wicked Insane writes in on YouTube, super chat, Trump charisma, if he was a wrestler, would be through the roof. Biggest hypocrite ever, meeting with our enemies. So now again, I said on Friday's show, I don't mind him meeting with a North Korean leader. I'm maybe in the minority on that, but you're absolutely right that he's a perfect wrestler, except his followers don't realize that they're following a heel. Okay, and then finally, Elliot from YouTube Super Chat says, the Democratic Party is not there for you. It's there to protect the donors from you. So speaking of which, can I see tytkansas.com? This is Brent Welder's effort to get small dollar donors to match the big donors. And in fact, he is trying to reach $50,000 so he can hire a field team, go knock on doors without running expensive TV ads. I love to see that. If we can get to 1750 by the end of today's programming overall, not the dollar sign, but the number of donations, 1,712. That's about 1,700 more small donors than the incumbent Yoder has, which is amazing. So that would be great. Thank you guys for chipping in. And later in the program, Anna, I don't know if you know this, not in the Young Turks, but on TYT Network today, I'm going to interview Ken Bone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, he says that we misrepresented him. So he's coming on the air. He's got a bone to pick with us, apparently.
This is the mustachio gentleman with the red sweater.
Indeed,
yes.
The mustachio gentleman, indeed. So that's a little bit later. Members get to watch all the interviews live. So you get Rebel Headquarters, then Ken Bone, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member to watch that live. All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was interviewed by Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes, and among the interview questions, they delved into the issue of school choice, something that Betsy DeVos has received a great number of criticism or critics, something that Betsy DeVos has been criticized by a great number of people. Now, the interview was a disaster, and even White House members of the White House spoke out about how they didn't love her performance because she was ill-prepared. But before we get to the heart of the discussion regarding school choice, let's go to the one question and answer portion that I thought was amazing, given the fact that she is the education secretary. Take a look.
Have you seen the really bad schools? Maybe try to figure out what they're doing?
I have not intentionally visited schools that are underperforming.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should, yes.
Now, I might have unintentionally visited those schools. That was an accident, but
I didn't want to intentionally visit any poor people. I'm a billionaire. That would be unbecoming.
She's the education secretary, and she goes off about how our public schools are failing and we need to fix them, and her solution is to take taxpayer money out of our public schools and funnel them into either private schools in the form of vouchers or charter schools, which is what the heart of this discussion is about.
She thinks that if she says anything with a smile on her face, that it's going to work, and that's just not how it works on the national spotlight. That might have worked when you were a big donor, and there's a couple of different issues here that I'm going to get to in a little bit as to what her real problems are. And she's surrounded by sycophants, so since she's a billionaire and she's a huge Republican donor, so everybody's constantly kissing her ass. So when she comes in with that pleasant smile like, no, I haven't done my job, they're like, oh, bravo, bravo, Betsy, you did it again. So let's say that she's had over a year being the education secretary. She just couldn't find any time to go to a poorly performing school. But she could then say, you know what, I didn't, but I'll tell you what, I've studied it at length, and here are my conclusions.
But she hasn't studied it at length, which is abundantly clear in this interview. And also keep in mind, yes, she's the education secretary, but what are her qualifications for being an education secretary? She has no teaching or administrative experience. The only experience she has had is pushing for charter schools in her own state of Michigan, which has been a complete and utter disaster. So Leslie Stahl touches on that very issue in the following portion of the video. Take a look.
But when parents choose these options, taxpayer funds follow the child.
Here, can I help you?
And that means that the public school left behind can end up with less money.
Why take money away from that school that's not working to bring them up to a level where that school is working?
Well, we should be funding, investing in students, not in school buildings, not in institutions, not in systems. And
okay, but what about the kids who are back at the school it's not working? What about those kids?
Well, in places where there is a lot of choice that's been introduced, Florida, for example, the studies show that when there's a large number of students that opt to go to a different school or different schools, the traditional public schools actually, the results get better as well.
Now, has that happened in Michigan? We're in Michigan, this is your home state.
Michigan, yes. Well, there's lots of great options and choices for students here.
Have the public schools in Michigan gotten better?
I don't know. Overall, I can't say overall that they have all gotten better.
The whole state is not doing well.
Well, there are certainly lots of pockets where the students are doing well.
But your argument that if you take funds away, that the schools will get better is not working in Michigan, where you had a huge impact and influence over the direction of the school system here.
So that was incredible, especially given the fact that, again, she's the person who pushed for these charter schools, and she can't answer to the lack of success experienced by the state of Michigan. Now, let's get into the numbers and let's get into some of the specific things that she said in that answer. First of all, I just want to say that charter schools are a mixed bag, okay? Anyone who says charter schools are all bad is wrong. Anyone who says charter schools are all good and that's the solution, they're also wrong. They're lying. The fact of the matter is some charter schools do outperform public schools in some districts and vice versa. Now let's get to some of the specifics. She specifically mentioned the state of Florida and how school choice has been a positive thing in Florida. Well, in reality, yes, some of the charter schools in Florida perform well. However, there have been a lot of issues because charter schools are not regulated the same way that public schools are. So if you look at Florida, there was a 2014 report that indicated that 119 charter schools had shut down since 2008. Okay, and they shut down because they were failing miserably. In fact, 14 of those schools didn't finish the first school year.
That's amazing.
So these are the stats that never get talked about, ever, ever. Now, again, there are some charter schools that perform well, but you gotta look at the whole picture, and the whole picture is it's a mixed bag. There is no uniformity when it comes to charter schools. The standards are different, and also oversight is very different from what you would get from a public school.
And so there's a couple of things that are important about that lacking the oversight. So Republicans love to say, oh, it's regulations. You don't need those thinking regulations anyway. Well, if some of them didn't even finish their first year of school, what did they do? They enrolled kids and said, come here, and they started studying. In the middle of the year, they're like, you don't have a school. Good luck. I don't care. I'm a for-profit institution. I wasn't making money. I don't care about you or your education. See, that's why you use the government for some things like putting out fires and having cops. Because if you privatize those things, they'll only protect the people who paid them. And it's also true for public education. Because if you're doing it for profit and it's not working, it's like, I already lost too much money. So all of you guys, you're done. Good luck. Go try to find a new school in the middle of the school year. I wasn't regulated. What difference does it make to me, right?
Right.
And by the way, you could also cherry pick better students to recruit them to your private schools and then say to the public schools, good luck with those students. They're not performing as well. I didn't recruit them. There's a lot of different mix of how you could do that in charter schools. Some do, some don't. And then, by the way, when you strip the money out of the public schools to create the charter schools, when the government does that at the behest of people like Betsy DeVos, then the public schools have less money, not just for the buildings, but for the students. And then you've set them up to fail, and they do that on purpose so they could then turn around and go, I'm gonna privatize even more schools. But even defunding them, even doing that trick, and on a mass scale like they did in Michigan, because DeVos pushed so hard for it, a lot of the charter schools do worse than public schools. That means that is a miserable track record. If they have all of those advantages, they should on average be doing way better than the public schools. And that has been the thesis of people like Betsy DeVos. And overall, it is not true.
And that thesis is so disingenuous because they absolutely despise public schools, and they've been so transparent about that. And so to say, oh, creating more private schools or school choice or charters is actually gonna lead to more competition between these charter schools and these public schools. And so public schools are going to do better. They're gonna compete a little harder. It's difficult to compete when A, public school is already underfunded, and B, the government decides to take what little resources that public school already has and then funnel it into either charter schools or public schools. Now, keep in mind that charter schools do not have teachers unions, okay? So that's one thing that the right wing absolutely loves about charter schools. They despise the unions. And then two, keep in mind that they are publicly funded with taxpayer money, but privately run, which reminds me a lot of private prisons. That's exactly how private prisons work. Okay?
You know, Anna and I did not talk about this before the show, but that's almost the same exact analogy I was about to use. And including the cherry picking, because, for example, the private prisons leave the sicker inmates in the public facilities oftentimes. So then the public prisons have to pay a lot more in healthcare. And it's a neat little trick, and they still don't perform as well as the public prisons in terms of any metrics that you guide them against. No matter how much they cherry pick, they still don't perform as well, at least in the private prisons and in the charter schools. Despite all those advantages, it's about even. And that is a terrible track record.
So let me give you more statistics and more evidence to back this up, because I don't want anyone to think, oh, we're anti-charter schools, even if they're performing well, we're gonna say negative things. Again, it's a mixed bag. Some charter schools do perform well. But if you look at the broader picture, some studies indicate that they don't necessarily perform well as a whole. So a 2009 study from the Rand Corporation found little evidence that the presence of charter schools affect the achievement scores of students in nearby traditional public schools, either positively or negatively. Also, 2016 analysis of New York City schools found positive effects in public schools near these charter programs. But the effect was linked to increased spending at those public schools, not necessarily increased competition. And then let's look at one of the largest studies into charter schools throughout the country. Analysts at Stanford look into this ever so often, ever so often, and the more recent study came out last year in 2017. The Stanford analysts compared reading and math state-based standardized test scores between charter school and public school students in 15 states, as well as scores in the District of Columbia. Experts found that 37% of charter schools posted improvements in math scores. However, these improvement rates were significantly below the improvement rates of students in public school classrooms. 46% of charter schools experienced math improvements that were statistically indistinguishable from the average improvement rates shown by public school students.
So look, at best, that's even, at best. So now, by the way, you mentioned unions. Why are they against unions? You think, oh, it's because their unions cost too much money or they're not teaching the students well enough. No, unions donate to Democrats. That is part of the reason why Republicans want to destroy them. It's also because they get better wages for their workers. So for private industry, all their private donors want to destroy the unions. And even if they start with the public sector, they think it'll affect how private sector unions are doing as well. And I want you to understand the two different things that Anna just explained. One is, how do charter schools do versus public schools? And despite all their advantages, as you saw the numbers there, it's about even. The second thing is what Betsy DeVos was talking about. She was claiming that the charter schools even though they're taking away money from public schools, somehow magically make them better because of competition. And that is not supported by the facts at all, okay? Right. So that she's wrong about that one. And then finally, look, I used to think competition between schools would make them better. I'm an American, and I'm a competitive dude, and I thought that would work. And then we studied Finland, and it turns out Finland went in the opposite direction and went to #1 in education throughout the world, math, science, etc. Always in the top 3 every single year, and often #1. And what did they do? They took away all private schools. And when I first read that, I was like, no, that can't, I've got to be reading this wrong. So I read article after article, and it turns out one of the things that happens and why it succeeds is then Bill Gates' son is in your school. And all the rich peoples, and in New York, all those bankers' kids are in the school, same public schools as both the poor and the middle class kids. And you know what they do? They pull those schools up because they're not gonna let their kids go to bad schools. So now what do? They drain away all the best students and best resources to private schools. Then they're not done yet in America. Then they create charter schools and take taxpayer money and strip even more money and talent out of the public schools and then go, what? Why aren't public schools doing any better? And so that's the scam that's being played on you.
And I just, to end this, want to point out 2 cases of abuse in the charter school system. Because there is a lack of oversight, and as a result, whenever there's money involved, whenever there's taxpayer money involved, there's gonna be issues with people trying to steal that money. So one example was in Pennsylvania, where 10 school administrators pleaded guilty to embezzling school funds and also to obstruction of justice. So they were essentially using the charter school as their own slush fund. Another example was in Ohio, where charter schools were lying about the attendance in order to receive more taxpayer money. The more students that go to the charter school, the more money they receive from taxpayers. And so, of course, if there's gonna be a lack of oversight and there's gonna be money involved, there are gonna be issues. And it again, reminds me a lot of some of the abuses we see in the private prison industry.
And my final point is, why was she so unprepared? Because if you're in the cabinet, this is your job, this is your sole job, and you argued your whole life for charter schools. These should be layup questions. They should be really, really simple. My God, Michigan is your petri dish for creating more charter schools, and you did. You pushed and bribed almost all the politicians legally by pouring money into their coffers to get more charter schools, and including religious ones that you care the most about. So don't you know the Michigan numbers at all? Can't you at least come up with a misleading stat about Michigan to make it seem better? No, why? Because she has affluenza. She was born into a family that are billionaires. So unlike you and I, her success, like Donald Trump, her success has never been tied to merit. That's why they don't do their homework, because homework never led to good results, which led to success for them. That's how it goes for the middle class. Success was just dumped into their lap. So doing their work is a foreign concept to them. She's never been challenged before. All she's ever had was, yes, Betsy, absolutely, Mr. Voss. You're absolutely right, Mr. Voss. How can I get some more of your money, Mr. Voss? So even though she's a cabinet level person here who should know charter schools and public schools, the ones that are doing well, the ones that are doing poorly, she should have all these different ideas and forget the stats, but at least have a concept of what's doing well and what's doing poorly. She has none of that, and she brazenly walks into a 60 Minutes interview without a thought in her head, without a fact in her head. And she just thinks, if I smile politely and I'm a billionaire, I'll have everything handed to me. Oh, golly gee, why didn't he accept my smile and my empty head? If this is the person in charge of educating our kids, we're in for a world of hurt.
We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Aaron, which one do you like better? What is this? Or what is this? Go.
What's J&A?
Ja'Cory and Arthur.
You guys share a mug?
Yeah, you both take our hot cocoa black.
That doesn't make any sense.
Plus, I'm right-handed and Arthur's left-handed, so our lips wouldn't even touch the same area. It's perfect.
No. I'm not left-handed.
What do you mean? I've seen you type with your left hand.
Yeah, and also with my right hand. That's how typing works.
I have decided that I'm going to get ripped. Okay.
What?
Okay.
Like, physically?
Yeah. Okay. What? You don't believe me?
I 100% don't believe you.
I will get so ripped, here's my prediction, that someone at TYT will say, Cenk, you've got to stop working out.
We're tired of you winning.
So you don't believe me?
Cenk, you don't have time to like do your daily duties for the main show.
Duties. You don't even have time for your daily duties. Because what you guys don't know is how great my muscles already are.
It's absolutely possible, but you can't have Leah run to the food truck to get you like 2 different types of grilled cheeses with like tater tots for lunch. Like you can't have that anymore.
Let's see what happens.
You also have to go to the gym regularly.
Let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, let's see what happens. Have I ever been wrong about a prediction? Almost never. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Members of the day are Adam Knight and Wendy Kearns. Members power this show, tytnetwork.com/join. Today you'll get Rebel Headquarters as well as my interview with Ken Bone. And can't wait to see what he thinks we said wrong about him and how he's going to fight back. So that'll be fascinating, okay? I thought I was actually very fair and nice to him in that segment that we did.
I don't even remember what we said. We probably said something that pissed him off.
Well, that's apparently the case. That's why he's coming on. But I went back and rewatched it, and I thought I was exceedingly fair to him. But we'll find out. All right, like I said, members watch it live. Brian Newton says, cooperation always beats competition. Brian, I'm not positive about that. And maybe, again, because I'm biased, because I'm a pretty competitive dude. I think that it's balance is the right answer, except in the case of Finland, when they were like, no competition, just cooperation, and they kept it. On the other hand, South Korea is always in the top 3 too, and they focus on competition. Not necessarily private versus public schools, but the kids competing with one another.
Right, and also, I mean, it's not really competition when you have, when you like kneecap the public schools by taking away the funding, and you're like, all right, compete now.
Yeah, exactly, and which leads to Danger Carlos Danger writing, gut it, denigrate it, and kill it seems to be the Republican strategy on most things, not just public education. Exactly right. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. The topic of child marriage has been making headlines here in the United States. No, not in the Middle East. Here in the United States, Kansas, Tennessee, and now all of a sudden Missouri are facing a little bit of heat because of the fact that they allow for women or kids as young as 14 or 15 to get married to individuals in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and in some cases even 50s. So Missouri is making news because it turns out that it has a law that essentially allows for underage girls to get married to older men as long as one parent consents to it. One parent. So to give you some statistics, from 1999 to 2015, more than 1,000 15-year-olds married in the state of Missouri. Missouri actually defines statutory rape as anyone 21 years or older having sex with someone under the age of 17 outside of marriage, but within marriage, sex with a minor is legal. So what happens is in neighboring states, if a 15-year-old ends up getting pregnant by an adult, usually the family will feel deeply embarrassed that that 15-year-old got pregnant out of wedlock. And so to bring honor back to the family, they will go ahead and pressure the girl to get married. And in some states, you can't do that. So what they'll do is they'll travel to the state of Missouri to make it happen, to make sure that this 15-year-old gets married to the adult male who impregnated her.
A pilgrimage of sort. I guess Missouri is their mecca for child marriage. Look, I know why this exists. It's the part of the old culture, also based on the Bible, of you can't have sex outside of marriage. So once you hit puberty, obviously people want to have sex, so they got married really young back in the day. But that was back in the day, and a lot of us evolved, and some of us did not. So, and part of the problem with conservatism is that it is opposed to change. It is opposed to change for change's sake. They just don't, it's not in their nature. And so they believe that tradition and honor, et cetera, are important for their own sake, and not evaluating whether it's a good tradition or whether it's actually an honorable thing to do. But when you think about it logically for a second, having sex with a 15-year-old outside of marriage, if you're in your 20s, 30s, whatever, right, is illegal and will get you decades in prison. Decades in prison. But if you marry a 15-year-old and continue to have sex with them day in and day out, that somehow sanctifies it? That makes no logical sense.
None.
But for a conservative, logic is optional. Tradition is what matters.
It's devastating when you consider the fact that, at the age of 15, no one can really make a good decision about whether or not they should get married. And a lot of the young girls who were interviewed for various stories about this essentially said that. I mean, I got pressured by my family. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I had to say yes, even though I didn't want to get married. So Gloria Boyer is an individual who actually signs marriage licenses in the state of Missouri. And I wanted to read her quote to you because I thought it was interesting. She says, "We cannot do anything legally. If a parent signs and a couple wants to get married, there is nothing we can do to stop issuing that marriage license. You see situations come through where you're not necessarily really comfortable with it. I'm the recorder, I'm not the police for this." I just think it's so interesting because for the longest time in the US, we've been fighting these battles in regard to adult same-sex couples who want to get married. And you hear some members of the right wing say that goes against the sanctity of marriage, it's terrible. You know what I think would go against the sanctity of marriage? Pressuring a 15-year-old girl to marry a man in his 30s, 40s, and in some cases even 50s because she got pregnant by him, okay? In a situation where she could get exploited for the rest of her life. By the way, so let's talk about some of those ages that I mentioned. So let's go to graphic 37. Statewide, the number of 15-year-olds marrying has dwindled each year from 104 in 1999 to 16 in 2015. So the instances of child marriages in the state of Missouri has decreased significantly, and I hope it continues to do so. But the same report that I mentioned earlier that showed that there were about 1,000 15-year-olds getting married in Missouri between 1999 to 2015, stated that a certain number of those 15-year-olds actually ended up marrying men in their 50s. That's insane. Who would sign off on that? Who would say, oh, here's my 15-year-old daughter, she's pregnant by a man in his 50s. I'm going to go ahead and pressure her to marry him now.
Beware of anyone coming bearing honor. Whether it's honor killings in the Middle East and parts of Africa, whether it's families in Central Asia that pressure their daughters who are kidnapped and raped to marry their abductors, they all do it for honor, or whether it's in the middle of this country, whether it's the Middle East or the Midwest, when the families come and say, oh, in one case, a 14-year-old had sex after being plowed with alcohol with a 24-year-old. She gets pregnant. They wait till she's 15, and then they pressure her into getting married to someone who, under other circumstances, under that, if they didn't get married, that would be statutory rape. But it's okay, marry your statutory rapist. I mean, look, guys, you can't fathom how irrational that is to say that if you're not married to the person and you're having sex with a 15-year-old when you're in your 50s, the example that Anna just gave, that's rape, and we're gonna put you away for decades. But if the 50-year-old marries the 15-year-old and continues to rape her day in and day out, congratulations, you're a wonderful, honorable person. Well, is it rape or is it not rape? It depends on the biblical point of view, I guess. It's preposterous. That's perhaps why we should base our laws on logic and reason and not base it on ancient texts that make no sense.
Moving on to some other news. Donald Trump was in Pennsylvania doing a rally for his re-election, which is strange because he's already president and the general election is about more than 2 years away. However, during his rally, he decided to go back to his same antics where he says terrible things about females that disagree with him on things. So the latest example is Maxine Waters. Let's take a listen to what Trump had to say.
Maxine Waters, a very low IQ individual. You ever see her? You ever see her? We will impeach him. We will impeach the president. But he hasn't done anything wrong. It doesn't matter. We will impeach him. She's a low IQ individual. You can't help it. She really is.
The part of that video that actually bothers me the most is if you look behind him, there's a bunch of kids. Like there's this one really young boy behind him who's, participating in this low IQ nonsense. And it's sad to me. I just don't think that that's something that kids should look at as a good example of how people should behave. But
well, look, I'm less worried about him being rude than I am at the great irony of Donald Trump calling anyone else low IQ.
I have some fun in store for you to kind of buttress your point.
Yeah, look, I've been covering politics for over 2 decades, and Maxine Waters has been called a lot of things, and some justified criticism on some issues. She's been a champion on other issues, but low IQ, that has not been a criticism of Maxine Waters. She is very savvy political player in Washington, and she has been for a long, long time. For a certifiable moron like Donald Trump to call anyone low IQ, let alone Maxine Waters, is both disturbing and, I gotta admit, hilarious.
Now, Maxine Waters did respond to the criticism. Let's take a look.
This is typical of him. He is expert at name calling. I understand that in addition to continuing his name calling of me, referring to my IQ and calling me low IQ, that he continued to attack Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, maybe made some reference to Oprah Winfrey, on and on and on. And he seems that he's identifying and picking up more and more women that he's attacking. This is not only typical of him, this is what this con man does. He diverts attention from himself by attacking others. But, this business about Stormy is not going to go away. He can call us all the names that he want to call us. But, our special counsel, Mueller, is connecting the dots. And last night in a speech, I said that for if some reason Mueller does not get him, Stormy will. I'm not intimidated by him, and so he can keep calling names. I've got plenty for him. As a matter of fact, everybody knows he's a con man. He's been a con man all of his life, long before he ever ran for office. And so this con man Don, is going to keep it up. And again, he come for me, I'm coming for him.
Oh, I love that last sentence.
Yeah, she's not intimidated by him, and I love that. And by the way, I mean, you mentioned the irony of him saying that she's low IQ. So we're gonna get to him in just a second, but the people behind him who are cheering him on as he says those things about Maxine Waters are holding signs that say "Drain the swamp." Drain the swamp to, a president who has Rex Tillerson, former CEO of ExxonMobil, sitting in there in his cabinet. Steve Mnuchin, Wall Street, banker in his cabinet. Oh yeah, good job draining the swamp. Let's really take a look at who lacks IQ. It's definitely not Maxine Waters.
Look, you're not supposed to insult Republican voters because the mainstream media hates that. They think it's really, really rude. On the other hand, for 40 years, they've been insulting liberals on the radio, on TV, nonstop, and nobody ever said that that's not acceptable. So let me just call out the crowd for who they are. They're the cast for the next Goonies that's being shot. If you just look through the crowd, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, did your feelings get hurt? You went to an idiotic Donald Trump rally and you cheered at all the stupid things that he said, and I'm supposed to be polite to you? How many times have you said things about liberals? So there's a guy seeming to wear a turtleneck, but it's not a turtleneck. And I can go on and on about that cast over there. Like, oh yeah, Maxine Waters is low IQ. Donnie's so smart. And that's why he's bankrupting companies is smarter than not bankrupting them. That's good business. That's what he told me.
Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe they have a point. Let's take a look at how smart Donald Trump is.
They're going to take out clean coal, meaning they're taking out coal, they're going to clean it. Connor Lamb the sham, right? Lamb the sham. He's trying to act like a Republican, so he won't give me one vote. Look, I don't know him, looks like a nice guy. I hear he's nice looking. I think I'm better looking than him. I do, and he's slightly younger than me. Nobody has more respect for women than I do, nobody. Nobody has more respect.
Please, everybody. Donald Trump said the following about you, quote, "Look at that face. Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that, the face of our next president?"
It's an unbelievably complex subject. Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated. Well, Rosie O'Donnell's disgusting. I mean, both inside and out. You take a look at her, she's a slob. She talks like a truck driver. Your father's Herman?
Herman, sorry, yes, sir.
Yes. Well, your father, Herman, is looking down. He's very proud of you right now.
He's still alive.
Oh, he is? Well, then he's even more proud of you. Then he's even more proud. So we don't make mistakes. Go ahead, Ken.
Chuck Canterbury, the National President of Fraternal Order of Police from South Carolina.
We don't make mistakes. Go ahead, Ken. Chuck here.
That is our high IQ president.
Well, to be fair, though, Trump did say,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
Guys, the minute you knew that Donald Trump came into the room screaming how he's a smart person or like a smart person, we just now said over and over again, he even wrote it in a tweet and screamed in a tweet, "I'm a very stable genius." You should have thought, he thinks he doth protest too much. Perhaps he's the one with the IQ issues.
We got to take one more break. Stick around. You don't want to miss the last few stories that we have for the hour.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently. So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in a time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history in 2017.
And someone sent me a message on Snapchat, but now I can't find it. What do I do? Go.
And then they say, there's Donald Trump, an intellectual. Trust me, I'm like a smart person.
I just don't know what that means. Honestly, I don't know what that means.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Control Left writes in, I'm still baffled by this whole phenomenon. Who in the hell would find any of Trump's antics entertaining? And then, you know what I'm saying, writes in, con men can become convicts.
Oh, I like that.
Okay. All right. After the show today, we got Rebel headquarters. That's in about 15, 20 minutes. And that is going to be Paula Jean Swearingen and someone from the Nurses Union to explain how Medicare for All would work at the state level. So really interesting. And then after that, I'm going to be interviewing Ken Bone today. So that's a fun little thing for all you members to watch live, tytnetwork.com/join. Okay, what's next?
All right. Donald Trump will be heading to the state of California for the first time since he got elected as president. And during his visit, he plans on doing two major things, one of which should probably infuriate some of the people who voted for him, considering he was touting the fact that he didn't receive any campaign donations from big corporations or anything like that. Now, Trump's overnight visit will include a stop in San Diego to inspect 8 sample designs for the wall he's been trying to build. He will also be traveling to Los Angeles for a Beverly Hills fundraiser where attendees will pay up to $250,000 per person. So he's already raising money for his re-election campaign, and I just love the fact that this is news that isn't really making headlines. No one's really talking about it. He is the candidate who talked about corruption, how he's gonna drain the swamp, how he's not gonna take money from these millionaires and billionaires, but he's doing exactly that, and he's going to the state of California, which he cannot stop saying negative things about in order to raise the money for his re-election campaign.
He said about California, they don't care about crime, they don't care about death and killings, they don't care about robberies. Well, then why are you here? My God, the Secret Service is gonna have to work overtime to protect Donald Trump in this crazy, dangerous state of California. And if California is so dangerous, how come it's the richest state in the nation? 1 out of 8 Americans live here. It's the 6th largest economy in the world by itself. We've got Hollywood, which is an engine for growth in Southern California, and it obviously sells their products all across the world. You got Silicon Valley in the north. It is now a majority state, meaning that minorities, blacks, Latinos, Asians, etc., are more than white people in California. If that kind of immigration was such a bad thing, how come California's the richest state? How come it's incredibly successful? So this talk of like crime running rampant in California is preposterous. In fact, if California is in such bad shape, how come there are dozens upon dozens of people who've got $250,000 to give away to you at a dinner? It's almost as if we've been pretty successful here in California. So he's ostensibly coming to look at the wall. And in the past, he's intimated that he almost wants to do like a Miss Universe kind of pageant for the different kinds of walls to build.
Because everything's a reality show in his book.
Everything, right? So, but that's not really why he's coming. He can go see the wall in Arizona. He can go see it in Texas. There's a lot of different places he can see the wall. He's coming to California to see the wall, when in reality, he's going to get a wall of money from rich folks. He said during the campaign, to Anna's point, I don't need their money. I don't need their money, okay? I have my own. And all these politicians up here during the Republican primaries, he said it over and over again. It was one of his most successful lines, and I said it at the time. I'm like, that's a winning line, where he said, I already bought all these guys. Well, Donald, now they're buying you. They're not giving $250,000 a person for their health.
That's right.
They're not giving it for charity. They're doing it to buy your corrupt ass. And that's why you're actually coming to California.
Donald Trump is the type of person who knows exactly what to say to appeal to people who feel left behind by our system of government, who feel like they've been abandoned by establishment politicians. He knows exactly what to say. But while he talks the talk, he never walks the walk. He basically filled the swamp with more swamp monsters. And then he's also raising a ton of money, $250,000? $250,000 per person. That's not $250,000 total in one fundraiser. That's per person, per person. He has taken advantage and exploited a corrupt political system from the other side as someone who acted as a donor, and now he's exploiting that same system as a politician. Anyone who thinks that he is anti-establishment or that he drains the swamp is either completely uninformed or is in denial. Okay, because this is what the reality is, $250,000 per person.
Okay, by the way, the legal limit is supposed to be $5,400 for any one candidate in one race, $2,700 in the primary, $2,700 in the general election. So how are they getting to put $250,000 in per person, some even higher? It's because the Supreme Court gutted all the campaign finance laws. So they just call it independent expenditures. They give it to the Republican Party, they give it to the Republican governors, Republican senators, and then forget all that party stuff and the candidates themselves, which they do in masses, but they then give it to organizations that funnel it in through dark money and all these other super PACs and different kinds of PACs. So that is exactly what the corruption is, because the average American knows that nobody's giving away $250,000 or more because they're not getting a return on investment. No, and in this case, they got a wonderful return on investment. So while you guys were getting nickels and dimes in your paychecks because of the tax cuts, the average 1%er gets a tax cut of over $50,000. But if you're really wealthy, let's say you're running an LLC, that's a pass-through business, and it could even be a small business. At $10 million a year in revenue, for example, I think is considered a small business. Might seem like a lot to the average person, but it's a small business. It's not billions of dollars. Well, the amount of money that they could save is $1.5 to $2 million per year. So if this guy gave you millions of dollars per year, giving him back $250,000 so he can do it again is actually a pretty good investment. It's not a charity. They're buying him. He's going to an auction where they have purchased him. And it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, you know that. And that's exactly what you were complaining about when you wanted Trump to drain the swamp. Unfortunately, he was lying to you through and through.
Final story for you guys. During Trump's recent campaign rally in Pennsylvania, he addressed women and specifically the females who cast their vote for him in the last general election. Take a look.
Didn't we surprise them with women during the election? Remember? Women won't like Donald Trump. I said, have I really had that kind of a problem? I don't think so. But women won't like Donald Trump. It will be a rough night for Donald Trump because the women won't come out. We got 52%, right? 52.
Okay, so he did not receive 52% of the female vote. In fact, Trump received 52% of the white women vote.
Wow.
So that's one word missing from the statement that he made, but it's an important word. Now, interestingly enough, he might be losing support among white women as well, specifically evangelical white women. So recently, there was a story done by, I believe, the New York Times. Yes, the New York Times. And it looked into Trump's approval numbers with the evangelical community. Now, that is the community that makes up the core base of his supporters. And fascinating statistics regarding women and how they're starting to kind of regret their decision to vote for him. Let me give you some more details. According to data from Pew Research, support among white evangelical women in recent surveys has dropped about 13 percentage points to 60% compared with about a year ago. Now, 60% is still incredibly high, but the fact that the number decreased 13 percentage points is saying something. The women in suburban Dallas all conceded they have cringed sometimes at Mr. Trump, citing his pettiness, impulsiveness, profanity, and name-calling. Carol Raines, one of the women who had supported him, was quoted as saying the following: "I would like for someone to challenge him, but it needs to be somebody that's strong enough to go against Democrats. Certainly we're all embarrassed," as another woman, "but for the most part, he represents what we stand for." So they have an issue with his behavior, but they like his policy. They like his hard stance when it comes to immigration. They like the fact that he nominated a Supreme Court justice like Neil Gorsuch. And they like the fact that he is not Hillary Clinton. In fact, another woman was quoted as saying the following: "At least in my experience, it was more of an anti-Hillary vote than a pro-Trump vote." So, yeah.
So, Miss Leonhardt, who had the quote that you read just a little while ago, Anna, about certainly we're all embarrassed by him, but he supports what we support. That's the essence of it. That right there is 99% of the equation. We know he's an uncouth moron, basically, and he embarrasses us day in and day out, but who cares? So now he's lost a good chunk of their votes, theoretically, according to the polling. I don't know if they'd really vote that way, if push came to shove, but still 60% of white evangelical women say, no, I'm down with Donald Trump. So that's fine. And by the way, if you're really pro-life, as they call themselves, and for whatever reason, that's the only thing you care about, and you never read the Bible, and you don't know that the Bible is actually pro-abortion, okay, fine, I get it, you're ignorant, no problem. But don't come pretending that you care about values. Don't come pretending that you care about character. Because these people during the Clinton era, the character, it's all character. It's character. Now you have the worst character in the world and you know it. How many adulterous affairs with how many adult actresses? How many times did he cheat on his wife? How many times has he been married?
I mean, he supported a child molester in the state of Alabama for that Senate race, Roy Moore. I mean, it goes on and on. It's beyond rhetoric for me at least, right? I mean, yes, he uses profanity. Yes, he says some pretty terrible things about women, and he brags about kissing them without consent and groping them without consent. But it's also his actions. The fact that he has supported someone like Roy Moore, the fact that, days before his election, his lawyer paid off a porn actress that he had an affair with to the tune of $130,000. It's just his behavior, the way that he referred to female contestants, beauty pageant contestants who had gained weight, going on national television talking about, about their weight in a very disgusting manner. I mean, these are the types of things that should make all women, including evangelical women, stop and think about, like what are you doing? Like, look at your life, look at your choices. And then also, I feel like some women in the evangelical community feel pressured by the men in their community to vote a certain way and behave a certain way. And I'm not just making that up. So there are literally secretive evangelical groups made up of women who have to secretly talk about the fact that they don't like Trump. And they feel that they can't openly discuss these things because their community will rain hell on them. And it's terrifying to know that people live in those types of communities where they can't speak their minds and openly share what they think about what's going on in the political world.
You know, a really good way to hide yourself when you're quietly criticizing Donald Trump and you don't want your religious organization to find out is to wear a burqa. And then they won't know who you are, and then you can whisper all you like about your so-called principles. So look, it's a 13-point drop among white evangelical women. That's significant, there's no question. He's down to 60% that are still supporting him, which is a giant number, right? So he's still in pretty good shape with them, but he needs all of them. The only reason he won the election last time around was evangelical voters came out at a stunning, unheard of 85% voter turnout. And of those, 81% voted for Donald Trump. Those are record-breaking numbers. So if he loses evangelical support, men or women, he doesn't have much room for error. He already lost the popular vote by millions of votes. He barely won the Electoral College because of 78,000 votes in 3 states. So that 13-point erosion in a key demographic is deeply problematic for him. And by the way, we're seeing that play out all across the country. You're seeing losses for the Republicans in Oklahoma and Kentucky and Wisconsin and all these areas. Right now, Rick Saccone is running in Pennsylvania. Trump won that district by 20 points. According to the last poll, he's down by 6 points. That's a 26-point spread. Because even if they're not going to go vote for the Democrat, they're staying home. Democrats are energized, and these people are not. So I think that's a positive trend. I think that if you respect yourself, you might want to actually look into what you claimed were your principles for your whole life. I don't know, or maybe they just think, I've been brainwashed into thinking that the Bible is against abortion, even though that's not true. Read Numbers, and you'll see that it's for abortion. But I've been brainwashed into that. I've been brainwashed into thinking that's the only issue. The only issue that matters. No matter what you do to women, no matter what you do to other people, no matter how bad a person you are, all the other issues about morality, we were just kidding.
So I want to quickly mention, though, of the evangelicals polled, only 4% of them said that abortion was their #1 issue. And
I don't believe them.
Interesting. Okay, you might be right, because that is an issue that they care about deeply. And the majority of them stated that the economy and national security were the 2 issues that they cared about the most. But I do also want to give credit to some of the evangelical women who do have their principles in line, and they do follow their principles. So one of them is Karen Swallow Pryor, and she said the following: I was one of those culture war evangelicals in the 80s and 90s. I was appalled by the candidacy and presidency of Bill Clinton. It was hammered into my mind that character mattered, and that did change when Trump came along. In some ways, I felt betrayed by my evangelical peers who taught me and cemented in me the idea that character matters. I didn't abandon that belief. I feel like some evangelicals did.
All right, we're out of time. That's all you got. Bye-bye. Rebel headquarters. We got a great show ahead for you guys. Paula Jean Swearengin taking out Joe Manchin in the Democratic primary in West Virginia. She's going to be on in a little bit. I want to do announcements before we go to our first guest, though. Very important week for progressives and for everybody in the country this week. Tomorrow we've got a special election in Pennsylvania's 18th district. That's Rick Saccone versus Connor Lamb. Rick Saccone is a guy who said that he was Donald Trump before Donald Trump. He's been sending out those mailers, which I think is why he's losing. But if you're in the 18th district, make sure that you don't get a Donald Trump clone in that area. So go out and vote. If you want to know how to vote in your neck of the woods, tytnetwork.com/register. We'll have that link down below, as well as all of them. Also tomorrow, March 13th, there's a state Senate special election in Tennessee, in Tennessee's 14th district, and that's Gail Jordan. I point that out because she's now one of my favorite legislators in the country, or candidates in the country, I should say. She's the atheist grandmother that the Republicans in Tennessee are calling the most dangerous person in politics. Definitely go out and support that. Mainly go out and vote, okay? We'll have links to how to help Gail Jordan down below if you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook as well. And one more thing, March 14th is Women's March on Enough National School Walkouts. So it's going to be for 17 minutes at 10 a.m. across every time zone on the 14th, which is Wednesday, to protest Congress's inaction and doing more than just thoughts and prayers. This inaction is unacceptable. We'll put a link to the actionnetwork.org website that has information on this event also down below if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. So make sure you check that out and participate. Most importantly, this week, go out and vote. All right, now let's go to our next guest, okay? Now joining me, Michael Lightley. He's with the National Nurses Union, which is great, and fighting for Medicare for all, which is also great. Now, obviously, this is Rebel headquarters, that's my opinion. Michael, thank you for joining us, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Cenk, great to be here with you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Can you guys hear?
Yes,
Michael,
can you hear me now?
Talk again? Nope.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Sorry, Michael. Sorry, everybody. Let's just take a quick break while we fix that technical problem. We'll come back on with Michael. We'll still have Paula Jean on as well. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Okay, hopefully we have that issue straightened out. So let's try this again. Now joining me, Michael Lightley. He is the Director of Public Policy for National Nurses United. Michael, great to have you on the show. All right, wonderful. Okay, so there's the issue of single payer. This is a progressive show. Almost everyone in the audience, I think, almost is for single payer. Certainly I am and the hosts are. But I had a question about how it would be applied at the state level, because your organization is fighting for it to be applied at the state level in places like California. So let's just talk about how to make that happen, because oftentimes you'll see in the press, they'll just continually, including the big papers like Los Angeles Times, just say it's not practical and move on. So is it practical, and how would it get applied in California, for example?
Well, California, as you know, is the sixth largest economy in the world. It has more people in it than Canada, and it has the resources of a nation. It's taken on the climate crisis in a very aggressive way. So it's hard to make that argument, I think, given the state and its size and its population and its resources. As a practical matter, of course, we do need certain federal waivers. These are not statutory changes. Very broad authority under the Affordable Care Act to improve coverage and access at the state level. In fact, we can have access to those tax subsidies under the ACA, and we can apply that to a universal health care program in California. Certainly, Californians are entitled on a per capita basis to the same health care benefits or spending, federal subsidies, and so forth that any other state residents are. And so we would consolidate those monies. We would replace all the premiums and copays and deductibles that we currently pay through private commercial insurance, consolidate that with the existing public sources, and we'd be able to actually save money. We estimate about $37 billion less than we're currently spending would, in fact, be able to guarantee health care for all. So it's true that we need some cooperation from the federal government, but it's also true that the federal government is letting the states do whatever they want. And those who would say, oh, we can't take on the Trump administration, we're not saying that about immigration, we're not saying that about other issues. And in healthcare, what could be more important? So we think we have the legal, statutory basis to get these waivers, and we'll wage the political fight to do so.
So, but let's dive deeper into the weeds. Could we do Medicare for all? What would that mean at a state level? Because Medicare is a federal program.
Right, and really to dive in, you're right, Cenk. It is different. There are two ways to do it. What we're proposing in California is to adopt Medicare rates, and then we're essentially creating a seamless relationship between Medicare and the rest of the single payer system. So ideally, we would put all the monies in one pot, pay all providers. Failing that, we would then, of course, consolidate as many of those resources as we can, and then we would adopt the Medicare rates and the Medicare approach to paying providers, but we would still have the federal Medicare and our program. It depends on exactly how we want to administratively consolidate it. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to have pure single payer at the state level, but we can have a Medicare for all type system at the state level, and we can, in fact, improve Medicare for seniors by eliminating their Medigap policies. Part B, we can replace those with this new coverage. We can make Medicare Advantage less advantageous because we basically replicate those benefits in this program, and we would be able to provide the drug benefits that are currently privatized through Part D. So if you look at all that, we're either able to create a parallel, seamless relationship between the two programs or consolidate it completely into a single payer.
Okay, then what happens to private insurance in California?
Goes away, except for a very small role as supplemental coverage. You have some benefits, maybe expanded dental benefits, oral health benefits. We include that, but maybe you want to upgrade that. Maybe you want to have a private room at a hospital or cover those things that the program doesn't cover. So there would be that supplemental benefit role. Beyond that, there is no role for commercial insurance. No deductibles, no copays, and no premiums.
So the health insurance companies are going to fight you guys like there's no tomorrow, because there literally might not be a tomorrow for them in the sixth largest economy in the world, which is California. Let's talk about the pharmaceutical companies for a second. At the national level, we have this insane law, and there's no other way to describe it, other than obviously rampant corruption, where we are not allowed to negotiate with drug companies. Now, what would be the situation here in California if we're doing a single payer system? How does that affect our negotiations with drug companies?
We would enter into those negotiations. What we call the Healthy California Trust would enter into negotiations with the drug companies, and they will have a choice. They can either provide prescriptions to 40 million Californians, or they can walk away from that market. We don't think they will. We think, though, we can engage in those negotiations successfully. We estimate that we could save 30% off of current prescription drug costs. The VA does this. There's no reason why we couldn't also do it. And so we actually think this is the best way to address pharmaceutical prices, because it's in the context of containing prices throughout the system. So you don't limit the costs in one area, say insurance or hospital charges, only to see costs go up in prescription drugs. You've got to take them on all at once, comprehensively, with the leverage of a single payer. And so we think that will be successful with containing drug prices and lowering them, in fact.
So how about employer-provided insurance? I've always been curious about that. So right now, there's all these employers in California that provide insurance for their employees. What would happen to that?
Well, they would have better benefits. Frankly, the average out-of-pocket expense for those with large employer plans, which are the best plans, averages about $4,400 a year. That would go down to much, much less, maybe a tenth of that. And we can, through public financing and eliminating the profits and marketing and administrative burdens of the present system, both on doctors, hospitals, and of course the waste of the insurance companies, we can actually lower those costs. And so in that sense, it works very effectively to consolidate those services.
So, but I'm curious as to what happens. I get the concept of it lowering costs, but I'm curious as to what literally happens with those employer-provided health insurance.
Oh, I see.
Do they just not give that anymore, and you get it from the government? And so does that mean that the employers would save untold amounts of money by not having to provide insurance?
Well, they would pay a tax of some kind. We estimate that a payroll tax of around 7% would do it. Many of these employers are paying double that or more. So you're right. First of all, the cost savings, it relieves them of the administrative burdens of having to negotiate with the insurance companies or set benefits. But you're right, those employer-sponsored insurance plans go away, but it's such a tremendous savings for the employer and for the workers that it's really in their interest to do so. For those employers who still want to provide benefits, there is that role for supplemental benefits. What we say is that this is a way to free up resources for investment and growth, for innovation. Workers will no longer be tied to their job. Employers will no longer be burdened by the administrative expense of having to provide insurance and administer those benefits. And in fact, you can increase wages and pensions with the money you save. So, frankly, a lot of the businessmen in other countries think that their American counterparts are a little nutty that they haven't gone to this system, which is so much more efficient and cost savings for business. I mean, keep in mind, Cenk, these insurance companies add nothing to the bottom line of businesses. So really, it's kind of the Business and Worker Liberation Act in a sense.
Yeah, I've actually heard a lot of business people talking about how we're weighing down our economy. In fact, Warren Buffett talks about the number one way that we weigh down our economy is by providing insurance through employers, which makes no sense at all when the rest of the developed world provides it through the government. It's both more moral, more cost efficient, and doesn't weigh down your companies. But from the employee's perspective, last question here, because this has been wonderful and really educational. So in the time that I have, I want to focus on the employees for the last question. So your employer picked up a lot of your health insurance costs. Now you still had your deductibles and you had your co-pays and you contributed that to some degree depending on the company that you're in. Now your taxes are going to be higher. It's for a single payer system. I understand that overall costs are lower, but if your employer picked up a lot of your costs and they're not doing that anymore, talk to me about how that balances out for the employees.
Well, the employers are still paying the bulk of the costs, either through a payroll tax or perhaps we also have proposed what's called the gross receipts tax. So they're still paying the bulk of the costs, but they're paying much less than they would. And similarly with workers, there may be a small sales tax that they have to pay. We estimated in California. Actually, I was looking at Iowa the other day. Middle class family in Iowa, they currently spend about $5,480 a year now. They would go down to $548. You're right. There's a very small number of workers who pay literally, nothing for their insurance with their employers. They would see a slight increase. But the fact is, most workers are paying at least having a $1,400 deductible plus their co-pays and co-insurance. There's, as I said, $4,400 is the average out-of-pocket cost for those covered by large employers. So for workers, this is a huge savings. Basically, it's about a 9% raise for middle-class workers.
And by the way, just so everybody knows, in a sense, I'm also an employer. Not in a sense, I am. Right? I run Young Turks. We've got about 100 people who work here, and so if we are relieved of the burden of having to pay for a lot of the healthcare coverage, well, then that means we could increase salaries because that's already in the budget. The amount we spend for both salary and healthcare is in the budget. So your wages could also go up. And that'd be a nice little benefit for everybody as well in this system. So Michael Leidy, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you guys want to get more information on this, go to nationalnursesunited.org. And I always wanted to get this perspective and make sure that you guys were aware of all the facts of how that transition would actually occur. And it has been thought through and thoughtfully presented here by Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Cenk. Really appreciate it.
All right. Now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Paula Jean Swearengin. She is running for senator in West Virginia in the Democratic primary against Joe Manchin. There's a lot of news in that race, so I'm going to come back and talk to her. Back on Rebel headquarters. Now joining me, Paula Jean Swearengin. She's running for U.S. Senate against Joe Manchin in Democratic primaries. Paula Jean, great to have you back on the program.
Hey, Cenk, how you doing?
Great. Well, West Virginia is in the news a lot lately. Plenty of strikes going on down there. So curious as to what your, I guess, position on those strikes are. But even more curious, because I have a sense, given how progressive you are, where you're going to wind up. But what Joe Manchin's position on those strikes have been.
Well, you've seen with our public employees and educators, they did get a 5% raise. Our correctional officers and state troopers, they got a little bit different. Changes in PEIA are frozen. They're being dealt with a task force right now. There were 23 people on that panel. Bob Beach, let's shout out to him. He fussed and 6 more people were added, and those were women because everybody on the task force were men, except for one. So now there's 6 women added and 1 Raleigh County school teacher. And what you're looking at with Frontier Communications is the infrastructure. There was federal dollars and state dollars coming here to create an infrastructure through Frontier Communications. So federal and state dollars came in for that. And actually in 2010, when Joe Manchin was governor, he kind of led that effort. Frontier has not been putting that money into the infrastructure like they promised, and they're not hiring local. From what I'm hearing from the state workers and being out in the streets with them and talking to them, is that they're hiring out-of-state workers, and that money is also being invested in other states. So the money that was supposed to come in here and create the infrastructure has not. And since Joe Manchin's been senator, he's pretty much give up on that effort, and he's not holding Frontier to their promise. They were over invoicing customers, and they were supposed to pay back $4.7 million, and he's not held them to that either. The funny thing about Joe Manchin is I called him out on social media. Actually called out all of our federal candidates that are running in the Senate race, because outside of Patrick Morrisey, he threatened to get our educators and public employees arrested. I was the only federal senatorial candidate standing up with our state workers. I've been out with them day one. My team has been in communication with educators and public employees and our legislators every day. When I called Joe Manchin out, he showed up at the Capitol for a photo op. When he finally did get involved, he sent in Jim Justice's senior lobbyist, Larry Piccio. He's a coal lobbyist. He used to be over the West Virginia Federation of the West Virginia Democratic Party. He used to be Joe Manchin's chief of staff, and now he's his senior advisor. I read in the paper the other day another coal lobbyist, Chris Hamilton, head of the Coal Association, was allegedly caught entering the building with Larry Piccio's key card, and Larry Piccio is believed to be the only lobbyist with a key card to the Capitol. So not only did Joe Manchin recruit Jim Justice and campaign for him, his solution for our public employees was to send in him and Jim Justice's lobbyist into the Capitol. He's really not done anything. When he showed up at the Capitol for a photo op, he didn't get a real warm welcoming. Some of our educators was happy that he was there, but he showed up saying that we should hold a special session, it should go on the taxpayers' backs. And then he went on to say that he didn't know what was going on, that he'd not been here. Now, as a federal candidate, I have big problems with what's happened there, because this affects 240,000 West Virginians. People were standing out in the streets begging for a livable wage, and they were begging for health care. And again, our senator was not there except for to show up for a photo op. And he's done the same things with the CWA workers. I've been out every single day. If it wasn't in the Capitol, it was out in the streets. And like I said, my team's been working with these people because it's important. It's important for this state. We need not only a good educational system, we need a good workforce, but our teachers are even having to buy pencils. And if we don't have a good infrastructure here, we're not going to have any, we can't invite business here, and good educators and good schools and good roads.
So I heard Joe Manchin went down there and said, quote, "I haven't been here, I don't know the details." I'm not sure that I would have admitted that if I went down there. This doesn't speak well of how much he cares about the issue. So, but I want to go back to Frontier for a second, because I think that that's interesting and instructive. So, are there workers currently on strike?
Yes, and like I said, 200 people have been laid off. Instead of hiring locally, they actually have contractors. They've hired contractors, and they've actually put the money out of state, and they've invested their business in out of state. Instead of the money that was supposed to get the federal dollars and state dollars that was supposed to go into the state, they haven't. And these guys are complaining. They're saying they're out there, they're putting Band-Aids on these lines. They want good customer service. They want their company to grow. And Frontier does not provide good services. I have Frontier at home. I have problems myself, and it's not the employee's fault.
Is Frontier a donor for Joe Manchin?
I'm not sure, Jake, if he's a donor or not, but I know he led the effort. That's a big part of his campaign promise, is to expand the broadband in this state, and he let Frontier over-invoice their customers. They owe $4.7 million, and he's not made them pay their bill.
And so, because the philosophy was that guys like Joe Manchin support companies like Frontier, but it's because it's going to trickle down to the workers. So, or to the customers. But if it's not trickling down on the workers, and that's what they're on strike, and the customers are getting ripped off, then what was the point of supporting Frontier in the first place? I feel like a lot of times they say that and it just gets lost in the shuffle and nobody ever calls them out. So why are you supporting the company if they're not helping the customers or the workers?
The Republican leadership does not support these guys right now either. They're not getting paid and they're not eligible for unemployment benefits either, because there was a bill that went through, Mitch McConnell led it, that they could not get unemployment benefits while they were on strike.
Okay, now we're running short on time, so I wanted to ask you about one more issue.
Sure.
Medical cannabis in West Virginia. What was the law and what just happened?
We had a medical cannabis bill last year, and pretty much what happened is it's pretty much dead. Tim Armstead the other day let the clock run out. They were making some amendments to the bill and putting some new legislation in. He let the clock run out, and it didn't happen. It didn't get to the House. The clerk said that they delivered it. He said it didn't get delivered on time. And pretty much we had medical cannabis and now it's gone.
So Paula Jean, you could buy, I'm not clear about this, so I just want to be clear. Could you buy medical cannabis legally last year in West Virginia?
We had implemented a bill last year, yes. We had led that, and they allowed the clock to run out. They were taking it over, the session was over. They're taking it over to the House. Tim Armstead said that they didn't get it there in time. Some people in the cannabis community, the advocates for medical cannabis, they're trying to get Jim Justice to call them back to session and make a decision, but pretty much they just underhandedly did not get the bill to the House, is what happened.
So it's not legal anymore?
No, well, from what I understand is the funding that was there is not going to be there anymore. Rusty Williams, he's been lobbying. He's been a leader for cannabis here and getting it, under law in West Virginia. I would really like for you to sometime to talk to him about it too, because he's led those efforts. We have a lot of people that have been working on that. I would really like for you to bring Rusty on and hear exactly what happened. It was a disgrace that they said they didn't deliver the bill, so we lost everything that we have.
So Paula Jean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that cannabis is the major drug problem in West Virginia. Isn't it opioids? And yet
we have a large addiction epidemic here, one of the largest in the country, yes.
And in fact, cannabis could help because that's a way of weaning people off of opioids instead of using opioids for painkillers. So what in the world's going on there? Is it the story, that we, as usual, where the politicians on both sides are doing well, but the state's getting screwed again?
Well, it could help with initial pain management too. So doctors could be prescribing. I mean, it's medicine. We know it's medicine, and it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of time. Cannabis is going to be legalized on a federal level. And if we do not do something with this state, you look at what happened just now with the public employees. If we had fully legalized cannabis, then we could have taken care of our public employees. They said it was a budget issue, but they don't want to tax the coal industry appropriately. They don't want to tax the gas industry appropriately. We're always having a budget crisis, but we don't have visionaries for our future. The Democrats stood behind, even with the problems with the Democratic Party here, I have to give a shout out to the Democrats in the Senate and House that stood behind our public employees. But we could have legalized cannabis and we could have paid our bills. We could put renewables, like I said, on mountaintop removal sites. We could manufacture renewables in West Virginia. We could have hydropower, geothermal. We could have implemented a single player plan on a state level the past couple of weeks, and we didn't see it happen. And the one thing that could create a good infrastructure, they took that away from us too. I mean, within 6 to 8 months, if we legalized cannabis, we would see economic growth within 6 to 8 months. It's ridiculous what's happened here. And this state has stood up on a national level. You've seen we've led a national movement, and it was led by our public employees and educators, because we have seen it's not a partisan divide. People want good jobs. They want good roads. They want clean water. Some of these areas in this state still don't have adequate sewage systems. We want growth, and we want clean and safe jobs, and we want health care, and people want a living wage. And they shouldn't have to fill our capital city to do it. And that's what's happened. And like the guys with Frontier right now, they're not only standing up for their jobs, they say that they're making a living wage, but their jobs now are being outsourced and the money's going to other companies. When is it going to be West Virginia's turn? And I am a federal candidate. If I was in office right now, I would be pushing for Medicare for all. I would be pushing for federal dollars to come into West Virginia. But it's going to take all of us to stand up. And I want to bring up too, Jink, is a bill that went through that I'm pretty upset about, and it's SJR 12, and it's putting abortion on the November ballot in the form of a constitutional amendment. And the Democratic Party and the leadership, since this has went through, and we had Democrats and Republicans vote for this bill. With this putting on the ballot, we could see a blue wave in West Virginia, and the shit show that's happened. The Democratic Party didn't even talk about this amendment. We're supposed to be pro-women's rights, and now this amendment's is a distraction on the ballot, and we're going to be divided with issues. This is not a partisan issue. Women should have a right to access in health care. If it's like I said, it's not a partisan issue. It goes back to education rights. If women had access to, birth control, if they had access to educational opportunities, we could find solutions and reduce the rates of abortion. But what they're doing now is putting these dividing issues on the ballot so we can be divided here and not bring real growth to this state.
All right. Paula Jean Swearengin running for United States Senate against Joe Manchin. Let me give the links to everybody. Volunteers are super important, so are donations, especially because Paula Jean's a Just Democrat. That means she does not take corporate PAC money. So find out more about her at paulajean2018.com. Paula Jean Swearengin, thank you so much for joining us on the TYT Network.
Thank you for having me.
All right, appreciate it. All right, guys, remember, special election in Tennessee and Pennsylvania tomorrow. Make sure that you go out and vote. And for all you members out there, we've got a great post game coming up for you right after this. TYTnetwork.com/join. All right, we'll see you there.